Open world games. You know them, you love them. I myself am an open world enjoyer. There's something amazing about being able to go experience everything that my eyes can see. It just tickles that itch in my lizard brain, and I absolutely love it. However, I am also someone who can get very fatigued with open world games. For a while, I thought that maybe open world games just weren't for me anymore, and I should stick to more linear experiences. This could not have been further from the truth. I still love an open world, but I have noticed a trend that is giving me fatigue. So let's get into that trend. Let's talk about the types of open world games that have me more tired than Jimmy Butler in the bubble. There's only one way I know how to say this. The Ubisoftification of open world games is what has me fatigued. Now, put your pitchforks away. There'll be no village burnings here. I understand that Ubisoft generates a certain level of disdain, and some of that is definitely warranted. However, there is a reason that the Ubisoft approach has become the default for making an open world game. The Ubisoft structure can be basically boiled down to a few key points. These are games where you climb to the top of a tall structure, scan the area, and that reveals points of interest on the map. There are oppressive HUDs in these games. They also have a massive checklist of things to do and collect. Sure, the strategy is no longer in vogue, and maybe you weren't around for when it was in vogue, but there is a reason that this is now cliche, and that's because it worked. Regardless of your own personal feelings about the early Assassin's Creed and Far Cry titles, these games were generally popular. The success of those games, of course, greenlit other developers to make the same kind of game. Bing, bang, boom, now the default for open world games is the Ubisoft approach. What specifically fatigues me about this approach is that it is being applied to games that should not be open world games. I understand that in today's gaming climate, developers want to make huge, expansive open worlds. That in and of itself is not a problem. The problem is the incessant need to make these worlds bigger and bigger without having the structure to back up the size of the game. With today's technology, it's easier than ever to create a gigantic, beautiful open world game, but it needs to have substance to justify having a massive world. The side content is that substance. The strength of an open world game for me is almost never the main story. The draw of an open world game is having a world that players want to explore. My favorite open world games have maps that I can just get lost in. The main story will not be able to keep me in the game on its own. The feeling I'm looking for is that sense of wonder I get when I see something in the distance and I have to drop everything immediately and go to explore it. However, if I don't find something intriguing when I get to that point, then I will quickly lose interest in the game. I won't immediately bail if I go to one part of the map and I'm not interested in what I find, but if this continues to happen over and over again, I will lose interest in the game no matter how compelling the main story is. This was my experience with Horizon Forbidden West. I loved Zero Dawn and was really excited to dive into Forbidden West. However, I kept running into this problem. The world is gorgeous, honestly one of the best looking open worlds that I've ever seen, and I wanted to explore the map. However, time after time, I would arrive at a location and be disappointed with what I found. I can't exactly put my finger on what I was let down by, but after about 9 hours, I just quit playing the game. The story was interesting enough up to this point, but since the overworld failed to grip me, I had no interest in continuing. I'm fully aware that this may be a me problem. Perhaps I should look past the open world and focus only on the story. That's a fair critique for my issue here. If the story is good enough, I should be able to view the side content as a chore list essentially and simply avoid it. However, my counter to that argument is that if the side content is not worth engaging with, or at the very least, a good supplement to the main story, then why is the game open world in the first place? If the weakest part of a game is the open world, then perhaps a more linear approach would work better. Not everything needs to be an open world game. I was let down by playing Horizon Forbidden West because the world is so beautiful that I wanted to like the game. I wanted to get sucked into the areas, but they just felt hollow to me. There is plenty to do, but I had no interest in actually engaging with any of it. For all intents and purposes, the game came off as empty. As I said, this issue may be a personal thing for me. Perhaps you're able to look past liking side content and simply play through the story. That is all well and good, but what happens when you run into a game that will not allow you to progress the story without engaging in the side content? Enter Assassin's Creed Valhalla. To put it frankly, I did not like Valhalla. It suffers from a lot of the problems that Horizon Forbidden West does. The world is breathtaking, but once you peel back the layers, it's a bright and shiny veneer on a world that came across as uninspiring. It's clear that Ubisoft is still able to create an interesting open world. I just played through Shadows and I absolutely loved it. However, Ubisoft missed the mark with Valhalla. The difference between Valhalla and Forbidden West, though, is that the game forces you to engage with the side content. To be fair, Horizon Forbidden West may also suffer from this problem, but I didn't get far enough in the game to know that for sure, so I didn't want to say so definitively. There are certain regions in the game that require the player to be a certain level in order to progress. Sure, you can go to these regions under-leveled, but it will likely not be a fun experience. At a certain point, the story missions will inevitably force the player to go to a region that they are not ready for. Here, you have two options. Either get your head beat in by enemies that are way stronger than you over and over again, or go do some side content. The main story missions alone will not grant the player enough XP to simply focus on the story. If the other activities in the game were enjoyable, I would not mind running around England ransacking churches or whatever. The issue rears its ugly head though when I don't care what's happening in the story and I have no interest in engaging with the side content. I'm effectively stuck. What ends up happening is that I simply put the game down. That was my exact experience with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There are times when forcing the player to do the side content can work. Take Shadows, for example. It is structured in a similar way. Again, the main quest will not give the player enough experience to simply go story beat to story beat. The difference with Shadows, though, is that the side content was so interesting that I never got to a point where I wanted to progress the story, but couldn't because I was under-leveled. If the game is going to force me to play the side content, then that content better be worthwhile, and that was not the case for me in Valhalla. While some open world games feel lifeless and devoid of any character, there are still open world games that come out and are able to capture the magic. The games that come to mind for me are Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom. These are open world games that I absolutely love. A lot of what I love about these titles is that they are breaking the mold of what an open world game can be. Each of the games simply drop the player into the world with next to no information about what to do and simply says, okay, go on, explore. When walking out into Hyrule for the first time in either of the two Zelda games I just mentioned, after, the tutorial area, you can go fight Ganon or Ganondorf at any time. There's nothing stopping you from walking up to the castle. However, you will likely get run over when you get to the castle. In that sense, there is nothing different between these Zelda games and Valhalla. The interesting thing, though, is that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are so full of NPCs, shrines, caves, optional quests that I wanted to traverse Hyrule and see all four corners of the map. Sure, in the back of my mind, I knew that I needed to go to the castle and save Zelda, but I also know that I cannot do so until I have the requisite gear and health. By the time I had had my fill of exploring Hyrule, I was ready to fight the boss. I had the requisite gear. I had enough health to do so. That is what I love about games like Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. There is no one holding your hand or giving you a checklist of things you must complete. The games only ask you to go and explore and trust that you will actually want to explore. I hope we get more games like Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom moving forward. Open world games are fantastic, and I love spending dozens of hours in them. However, not every game needs to be an open world game. If the world doesn't have interesting side content to engage with, I will likely not spend more than a few hours in the world. I love a beautiful and expansive world. However, if all the overworld has to offer are breathtaking vistas, I would much prefer a linear game with the same visuals. Too many developers have fallen into the trap of thinking that going the open world route is always better, and it's simply not the case. Instead of developers making more hollow open world games, I hope that they focus on making games that feel full and lived in. Thank you all for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video and are interested in joining our team, be sure to like and subscribe. We're a small outfit, but we have lots of room for some aggressive expansion. If you choose to join the team, make sure to tune in to our weekly meetings on my Twitch channel, Tuesday afternoons, of course. However, if you don't care about the team, no worries at all. I hope you all have a beautiful time, and I will see you all in the next one.